Welcome to Protect, Suicide Prevention Training Podcast for Healthcare Professionals. I'm Manan, Consultant Psychiatrist, Founder, and Head of Faculty at Progress Guide. Good day, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the Protect podcast, where we are continuing our conversation with Tracey Chitty from English Schools Foundation in Hong Kong. This is a continuation of the recap that you heard in the previous episode. So after the AWARE framework, we looked at the STEPS model. It's perhaps the most complex part of the Protect program, right? So in the STEPS model, we have brought together from 1897 Emils Durkheim's model of suicidality all the way up to the ideation to action framework, the recent models of Klonsky, Ruggs, O'Connor's models. So it's basically it's a mother of all models we kind of talk about, because it finds a place for where those different models work on. So at a very basic level, there is life in motion, which is life's going on, and then something happens which predisposes a child or kind of an adult. They have that predisposition. But they might carry that predisposition because they have family history of, say, depression. So that's a genetic predisposition. So that's biological. They may have a particular psychological makeup which predisposes them, or there are social factors which predisposes them. So there's that predisposition. And then something happens which kind of precipitates suicidal ideation. So it's a STEPS model. So life in motion, predisposition, one tier up is ideation, then there's intention, and then there's action. Some people who take action end up in that post-action phase of time of contemplation and reflection. Wherever we meet them, the goal is to take them towards a safe recovery. Of course, they don't need to go through all the steps to go through safe recovery. Wherever we meet them, we want to take them towards a safe recovery. Of course, they might not go towards a safe recovery. They could go back to a lower step or stay at the same step. So it's about conceptualizing suicidal distress over a spectrum. These steps are not categories because people fluctuate through these steps. So people may primarily be on the ideation step, but every now and then they might slip into some intention formation where they begin to plan certain things or start researching something. There is a group, 25%, who have no intention formation. They go directly from ideation to action. So often people write as one of the reasoning for not taking quick action or rapid action is that there were no suicidal plans. There was suicidal thinking, ideation, but no intention, right? But 1 in 4 do not do any planning. So it's really important to make sure that you have ideation and intention on an equal footing. So if someone is having suicidal thoughts that are frequent, they are intense, they are quite concrete, they cannot control them, they are kind of getting so concrete that they're working out a day and time when they might do something, like it's that at that level, they can't distract themselves from it. Treat it almost like kind of they are in intention formation. It's equally as important if someone is having long periods of rumination, they're not fleeting anymore. So treat it because you don't know, they may be 1 in 4 in that 1 in 4 group who will go into, that's a national comorbidity study. And this is quite a complex chapter. It's very difficult to summarize in a 3-minute window, but we looked at a number of models in here, particularly how the different factors that are laid out in the ideation to action framework, how they hit each and every step, but how do we keep that ideation action divide open, right? That was the big thing. Because when we are working with most people, and they are thinking about it, not suicide, so thinking about doing something, we want them to go to action. So like weight management, right? People think about going to the gym. They even get a membership to the gym, but they never end up going to the gym. So we want to close the ideation to action divide. Taking the gym membership isn't going to result in weight loss. We want to close the ideation to action divide. Someone's thinking of quitting smoking, but they actually don't quit. They don't actually pick up the phone and call quit line. So we want them to close the ideation to action divide. Here in suicide prevention, we want to keep it open. We want to keep it broad, as open as possible. They're thinking of ideation. We want to make the reasons for living stronger than reasons for dying, so that this divide is open. And that's where that assets-based focus, what matters to you, that comes in. Because what matters to them, which may be the source of their psychological pain, often is the source of psychological hope as well. So keeping the ideation action divider open. I think if there was one thing that people took away from that model, it would be, what is treatment for suicide, for someone in suicidal distress? Ways to keep the ideation action divide open, as broad as possible. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And how do we do that? Through their hopes, through the connections, all those things that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
It has to be preventative all at the same time.
Yeah.
I think what stood out for me too was the traditional kind of assessments. You would touch on that. I'm just visualizing the sheet that I used to have, and we had a part at the bottom which was positive resources. It talked about people, and it talked about dreams and hopes which they'd have. Really, it was completely out of proportion, and then the large focus of it was intent, purpose, access, means, all those sorts of things. And we didn't use the positive resources the way that it's been brought to life through here, as a way of both being preventative right in the moment and actually healing in the moment as well. Just reducing from that 5-5-5, just one. Reminding them, reconnecting with what's right, what's good, what's positive in my life, what's making my life worth living.
Yeah. And that's why Schneidman's cube is so powerful, it's so empowering. You don't have to eliminate risk. Well, you can't eliminate risk. You just need to move them one cube to the side, either on the psychological pain or the overwhelming life stress or the agitation. Just one stop, and you're making a contribution to risk management.
And that's been a helpful conversation already that school counsellors have been having in their schools as a result of this training. And I've had those conversations with vice principals too, and it does relieve some of that anxiety that we've talked about, as it's not 5-5-5 to 0-0-0, it's one bit.
Yeah,
that's significant.
Yeah. Fantastic that you picked that up, because we draw that Schneidman's model with 5-5-5 almost at the action end, and kind of 0-0-0 at predisposition, and there's this entire spectrum in between. I think what you did over there, particularly when talking about hope and all the future focused stuff, is you touched on the three key progress to practice things that we mentioned there. One is moving from a mindset of prediction to a mindset of prevention. So if they are presenting with suicidal ideation, or if they are presenting with self-harm, they are at risk. Full stop. They are at risk. Don't even bother categorizing them as high, medium, and low, because risk fluctuates, and you cannot predict all the factors that would make the risk fluctuate. So develop a mindset of prevention. What is prevention? Keep the ideation to action divide open, right? So that's the first mindset shift. Moving from all those things that you said are really important, intent and ideation, all the things that have happened in the past. Past is important because past shows us what the future will hold. But if your entire assessment is about the past, then you haven't really looked at the future focus. You haven't looked at creating hope for the future. So as we said, an assessment has two parts: the assessment, the exploration, but also to capture hope, because assessment is the first treatment session, showing the young person that things will not stay like this forever. You have had the courage to reach out and seek for help. Things will improve from here on. So the second shift in practice is moving from a mindset that is completely embedded in the past towards the future, because prevention is a future-focused activity. And how do we make the future safer? Is by drawing on the person's assets, their strengths, their things that give them hope, things that bring a smile to their face, their source of hope. So moving from what's the matter with you, which would be that deficits focus, to what matters to you, things that make you hopeful. So from prediction to prevention, from the past to the future, from deficits to assets. Those three things tie together this whole movement from moving from top to tap, right? Being on top, if you are on top, You are the person who knows it all. You are going to fix it all, right? But actually, when you're on tap, you are enabling, you are supporting them. You are helping them reconnect with that hope that they might have lost, rather than saying you have all the answers, because you don't have all the answers. So it's really important for us to have the humility to understand the place, our place in this young person's recovery. So if we had that humility, then we would actually act in a way where we are enabling, where we are supporting, where we are helping the person reconnect with their strength, with the light that might be dwindling at this point in time. Those were the 3 progress to practice things that we talked about. We talk about a lot of stuff in the steps models, which I'll not go into because I don't think we have covered it yet in the podcast series, but we will do that at some point. We would look at those in a fair bit of detail anyway when we go into, because this is just a recap for those who have attended the training. And then we had the chapter on empathic interaction, where we looked at the validity techniques, Shawn Shea's amazing validity techniques, which are all about intentionality. And I gave that with a bit of warning that do not use some of the validity techniques in children. We can use behavioral incident, which is very, very intrusive, but it's about facts. And what Shawn Shea says is that we are very good at supporting people in whom 70% of them wants to die and 30% of them wants to live, but actually very poor at supporting people in whom 90% of them wants to die and only 10% of them wants to live. So in that 90-10 group, people tell you what you want to hear, or people might tell you stuff because they believe they are beyond help, right? There may be all sorts of reasons why they tell you what they tell you. And he talks about this equation of intent. So he says real intent equals stated intent plus reflected intent plus withheld intent. So there are 3 parts to intent. So the stated intent, what is it that the person is telling you? Reflected intent, actually they have been making all sorts of plans around when they might do it, and they might have brought a rope, but they're telling you, oh, no, I can keep myself safe. So withheld intent, your alarm bell should ring for withheld intent if you see a dissonance between the stated intent and the reflected intent. So reflected intent is what you're deciphering from all the things that they have told you, not directly. Whereas stated intent, you are asking, are you going to act on this? How close you have come to acting on this? That's the stated intent. Reflected intent is what you're deciphering. And then withheld intent is the bit that for which the validity techniques are. So just a quick recap, behavioral incident, you can have fact-finding behavioral incident where you're just asking for facts, right? Not opinions, facts. How many tablets did you take? When did you take them? What did you do after that? Which is kind of like the sequencing behavioral incident where you're working your way through all the different steps that the person has taken. And one of the techniques we often talk about is people would often jump. Yes, I took the tablets. And then when the hospital, and you kind of go, whoa, hang on a moment. Can I just hit pause where you said, and I took all the tablets? Can I just rewind back to that point and tell me from there again? Because I feel that we skipped a bit around how did you get to the hospital? Who did you call? Because there are really important parts of that storyline which you could miss, because that is telling you, did the person seek help on their own? The level of intentionality they had when they did take an overdose. So it's really kind of blow by blow account. So that's behavioral incident. Then there was some of the techniques which were slightly, I should have said normalizing and shame attenuation. Right. The 2 ways in which you introduce suicidality. And that was a recommendation to all teachers as well as school counselors, as a way of introducing the topic of suicide. So very similar techniques, slightly different. Do you remember them, normalizing and shame attenuation, Tracey? It's a test for you.
Well, the normalization I use all the time. I think it's the the most welcoming open gate you can have to raise any kind of issue. And so normalizing, if it was around suicide, it's some things like sometimes when people are feeling such distress, or how I've used often is, you know, when I've worked with people before who experienced such distress, they'll often talk to me about wanting to end their life. Have you ever had those thoughts? So normalizing the thoughts that they're having, it's normal. Other people have had these thoughts given the psychological distress that you're feeling.
Yeah, you're using other people's experience as a way into opening the conversation around suicide. And it just makes it slightly easier for them to talk about it. Yeah.
Particularly when suicide isn't really something we talk about. So we're opening the door to say, yes, you're not alone. Other people feel this.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
You can use that, other people you know, or you can use statistics like, you know, if you're in the US, we quote the statistic 10 million people every year in the US have thoughts of ending it all. Have you had such thoughts? You know, so you've just normalized it because other people have thoughts like that. What about shame attenuation?
It's more personal is what I'm
Yeah, you are using the person's own pain as the gateway into the conversation. You know, given what you have going on, you know, your parents are separating, there's all these pressures from these exams, you know, all these things have happened to you. I wouldn't be surprised if you have actually thought of ending it all. Have you? You know, so you're normalizing it using their pain as the gateway into that conversation. So,
and I just want to invite you to answer the question, which does come to the counsellors often when you use this kind of a statement, and it's from parents and from teachers as well. But hang on a moment, what happens if they haven't been thinking that and you've just put that in their mind? Will that leave the student thinking, oh my goodness, my situation is so bad that maybe I should be thinking about that?
Yeah. So this is a very common question that comes up in terms of, I think we have unequivocal evidence that asking about suicide doesn't actually implant the idea. People who are in emotional pain, they have long back been exposed to the idea of suicide on television, on Netflix, on various different things, right? So you have nothing to lose by raising it, but you could potentially detect something that they are thinking about in their own private space. So no, you're not implanting the idea of suicide because they already know about it. And if you are in emotional pain, we know that that is on the continuum of that emotional pain. That's the one extreme of that. So if they're thinking about it, they're already thinking about it. You can't just make, and people will tell you, oh, no, not that. And we often tell people, just follow it up with a second prompt. Not at all, not even for a moment or two, right? So, and we ask people to soften your voice, soften your tone, show that genuine curiosity that you are caring, you know, you're only asking because you're caring for them. So, and that second prompt often brings out surprising disclosures. They would often go, well, actually, when I think about it, when my parents went really, really fighting, and I just wanted them to stop fighting. I don't think I was thinking about suicide, but I did think that, oh my God, I just can't put up with this all. That's just another way of saying that, yes, I have inched from the predisposition towards ideation. So that gives you an avenue into this, and they might not be suicidal, but they have somehow a passive desire to end it all, not their life, but to end the pain that they're talking about, which we know is a harbinger or a precursor to suicidal ideation. So it gives you an avenue to explore and to talk about. There were a few leading techniques as well, like gentle assumption, where, you know, you might ask questions where the answer is already embedded in there, which is something like.
So we were talking about things like, let's say we might have a student who's talked about jumping, right? And we might say, you know, have there been other ways, or what other ways might you have thought about killing yourself?
Yeah, what other ways? Or you can say, so even a question like, so when was the last time you had thought about suicide? In it, you have made a gentle assumption that they have thought about suicide, right? And if you want to soften it, just add if at all at the end of the question. when was the last time you had thought about suicide, if at all, right? So you could just soften it. And I'll always say, so one needs to be incredibly careful in using it with children, particularly because they're leading questions. There are also other techniques like the denial of the specific, where you're working your way through specific means that the person might have thought of. I'm missing one. So what is the one?
Symptom amplification.
Symptom amplification, yes. So that's the one that comes from substance misuse, where you quote a specific number which is higher than the normal. So if you ask someone, how much have you been drinking? They might say, just half a bottle of wine a night. But if you kind of go, how much have you been drinking? 4 bottles a night, 5 bottles a night? Oh, no, not that much. Maybe a couple of bottles. You suddenly get a much more accurate representation by inflating it. But one should not go so high with the number that you look silly. Like, how many times have you been thinking of suicide? 10 times a day, 15 times a day? Don't go 100, 200, 300. Then you come across as someone who doesn't know what you're talking about. So that's symptom amplification. It's quoting the number, which is important. So these validity techniques are quite good in terms of drawing out data with intentionality. The problem with the validity techniques is they can be quite intrusive. They meet the professional's need to gather data, but they don't meet the person's need to tell their story and feel validated. And that's where the alternative approach, which is the narrative method, comes in, where you just say something like, very open-ended, okay, let me just listen to you for a while. Tell me what's been going on. And you give as few interruptions as possible. And their story would be full of opinions, unlike the validity techniques, where if you get an opinion, oh, no, I haven't been feeling like that, you would say, well, for me, it is really important to understand the facts. So can we stick to the facts so I can make up my own mind about how unsafe the situation is? So people will give you lots of opinions. And in the behavioral incident, we really want to kind of pin down the facts. Whereas the narrative method, it would be full of opinions, but that's okay. You kind of let the person tell their story. Some people struggle with that open method. They don't know where to start their story. Yes, you're going to say something, Tracey.
No, I was going to say, I keep thinking about narrative therapy and the naive inquirer. Yeah. And that's the stance that we need to take, right?
Yeah.
We're naive. We're not in a position of power, and we just got those nice, gentle opening questions. We're inquiring and don't know where to start. Just choose any place.
Anywhere. There is no right or wrong way. Just start wherever you feel is convenient. And you could get to a place where someone strips out all the richness of the story and just give you a very tight overview. And you go, oh, that was a really helpful overview. Can I get into a little bit of the detail about some of the things that you've really been struggling with, right? So you can open that up. You don't have to just accept, because you want the richness in the narrative method. So what we do in Protect is we combine the intentionality of Shawn Shea's case approach, and we take the narrative method, and we have a technique that we call B4Now. And it's a sequence of 5 time periods. Day 1, so the first day, the day that you're making contact, where it may be after a crisis, but it also may be after someone have decided that they need help. Something has made them feel, oh my God, I need help. So talk me through the day. Then there is the 2-week window. So 1, 2, 3. So day 1, 2 weeks, 3 months before all of this. And then the here and now. We end with the here and now because you might have stirred things up. So there's no point in asking about the now right at the very beginning. Or you might have made things better because they feel listened to by you and the here and now might have settled. If you do the here and now right at the very beginning, make sure you do the here and now right at the very end as well. So day 1 will give you what made them seek help or what made them do what they did. The 2 weeks will give you the evolution of the symptomatology in terms of ideation, intention formation. How close did they come to action? What was the frequency of their thoughts? What was the intensity of the thoughts, the controllability, the distractibility? How did suicidality evolve? So that gives you that 2-week window. The 3 months would often have the source of their psychological pain. in terms of what's been going on, parental conflict or a romantic relationship ending or stress at school or, what is it what's their source of pain? That's often in that 3-month window that you will get a sense of that. Before that, we just talked about acquired capability. Okay, past attempts. Have you ever been this bad? Has it ever been this bad? So that's really important. And then you finish with the here and now. And then narrative linkages all the way through it. 1, 2, 3, before and now. And you can do that in a 15, 20 minutes. You can have a conversation in 15, 20 minutes. So you are attending to each timepiece. So you're taking Shawn Shea's intentionality in exploring each time compartment, but doing it in a narrative way, letting them tell their story. Does that kind of make sense, Tracey? Sort of in terms of exploring, but striking a balance between the head and the heart, between the data and the narrative.
The words that came to mind there was intentional exploration, like it's guided,
it's guided. It's guided.
And the richness of the information would be very, very helpful. And I do think therapeutic too for the client themselves telling their story.
Yeah. And because, in Protect, we do a lot of stuff from motivational interviewing background, and MI, motivational interviewing, is not directive, it's directional. Right. So, yes, you're kind of setting some parameters. If you kind of look at those cat's eyes on the roads, on the sides of the roads, you kind of, it's kind of just giving people so you don't veer off with your car, you kind of don't go off. So that 1 day, 2 weeks, 3 months, before and the now, in acceptance and commitment therapy, they talk about on track, off track. So if they have gone off track, you can, hey, I really want to explore the 3-month window. I'd really want to explore, do it in an intentional way and bring the story back in terms of, because you have your need as well to collect the data, right? So that you have all the information at hand to make a good clinical decision. So don't neglect your need while making space for the person to tell their story in those time windows. So you want the story, but you want it in that time window. I'm aware, Tracey, you must be, I'm sure it's dinner time for you. It's coming up to 10 p.m. here in Australia. So shall we call it quits today, and then we can revisit the rest in another one of our podcast episodes, because we've been talking for a while.
Sure. Good.
Any golden nuggets, any particular things that you would want your school counselors to take away from today's recording? We might actually have to break this up and do it over 2 episodes anyway, but anything specific that you might. So we talked about aware, rational versus rationalizing. We talked about the steps model, about the ideation to action framework and keeping the ideation action open. We talked about the 3 mindset shifts of progress to practice, prediction to prevention, past to future, deficits to assets. And then we talked about the different techniques, validity techniques. We talked about the narrative method. And finally, we talked about the B4Now, which combines the validity techniques with the narrative methods.
There's so much that we've just covered that I think even if it was just one thing that somebody heard and picked up and ran with, that would make a difference. I think in even what we've covered today, we could cover over 6 months, over a year, because it is so rich. And so even in those conversations I have been having with the school counsellors and with their leadership teams, to hear them pick up one thing and that's changed their practice and how they're viewing clients who are coming in with distress. There's no one place that I'd guide them, because they've got that in themselves where they need to go.
Like I've had a few of our podcast listeners write in saying, oh, you're doing this whole school thing, so we want to go back to the borderline personality disorder critical conversations bit. Why doing this? I said, look, it's a major commitment on our part at Progress Guide, working with English Schools Foundation. It's 22 schools. And we really want to each kind of put, every suicide is tragic, but a young person death always hits us more than the other ones. Don't know why, it just does. It just does. So it's a big commitment from us to these 22 schools. So I really want to work our way through the stuff that we have covered, because I know that people go attend a course and it's so full, like Protect. It's just like, there's so much that we pack into that day. It's impossible to retain all of those things. And we are very keen on retention. That's why we have all these acronyms, somehow you can draw on that acronym and those images, and you're able to put that into application. So we'll work our way through this, and it will just reignite the teaching that we did for the counselors from the 22 schools and the teachers. Some of them might listen to this as well. And we will return back to the conversations, the critical conversations for borderline personality disorder once we have done the recap for English Schools Foundation. And so we'll do that soon. Well, thank you so much, Tracey. As always, very generous with your time, and I'm sure your colleagues appreciate that. And you have a good evening and good day to wherever you are in the world, and take care.
Thank you, Manan.
That was Tracey Chitty from English Schools Foundation in Hong Kong. I'm due to go to India for a few weeks. On my return, I will complete the recap and would request some more time from Tracey so that we can go through the safety formulation, safety documentation, as well as safety planning. We'll also try and cover the 7 safe steps training that we did with the school counselors and educational psychologists. While I'm in India, I would struggle to get any podcast done as I will not have access to my recording studio. If time permits, and there is the option of any opportunistic recordings, I will make some so that we don't have a break in the podcast, but there is a high likelihood that we might end up with a break. I am returning to India after almost 3 years, so the last time we went was in the pre-COVID era. So looking forward to seeing my family. I'm also hoping to visit Leh Ladakh, which has been on my bucket list for a long time, and then my children would get to see the Autumn Festival. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Durga Puja or the Autumn Festival is like the Christmas for Indians, Hindus who come from the east of India. It is a sea of humanity that descends onto the roads for 10 days of festivities. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it is a sight to behold, and seeing is believing. So looking forward to that, and if it's possible, I might put together a recording, perhaps some experiences from Leh and Ladakh or the Autumn Festival. If that doesn't happen, I will see you, or you will hear from me sometime in October. In the interim, take care, keep smiling, and look after yourselves.